Welcome to Kev Talks, Real World Global Logistics. I'm Kevin Parkerson.
And I'm Kevin Higgins. Together we bring you over 60 years in combined experience in global logistics.
In each episode, we'll dive into the latest industry trends, share practical tips, celebrate wins, and share stories from the logistics front lines, all while helping businesses optimize their logistics operations.
On today's episode of Kev Talks, Real World Global Logistics, we're joined by someone who's not only talking about fixing inefficiencies in drayage and trucking, but actually building the tools to do it. Tyler Sellers is the founder and CEO of two innovative logistics tech companies, Qualle and DrayRates.ai. Both are rooted in one core mission, making the drayage sector smarter, faster, and more transparent. Tyler launched Qualle in 2022 as an empty container marketplace built around the concept of street turns. The idea that truckers can reuse empty import containers for export loads without the costly detour back to the port. It's a simple shift with big impacts: fewer empty miles, less congestion, and lower costs for everyone in the container supply chain. Today, Qualle is integrated with TMS, YMS, and WMS platforms and supports over 2,000 drayage carriers, including partnerships with major ocean carriers like Maersk, Costco, and Yang Ming.
But Tyler didn't stop there. In 2025, he launched DrayRates, a real-time pricing engine powered by artificial intelligence. This platform gives drayage providers the ability to get instant spot and contract rates, respond to RFPs faster, and analyze their win rates with precision. It's a huge leap forward in an industry where pricing data is often inconsistent or outdated. And yes, there's even an AI assistant that can answer complex pricing questions around the clock. Tyler brings a unique background to the space. Before founding Qualle and DrayRates, he held sales and executive roles at companies like Cargomatic, Next Trucking, and Assembly. And for the fun fact file, he also spent time as a professional actor, co-starring with Kevin Costner and appearing in national commercials. He's passionate about keeping freight moving, leveraging data for real decisions, and bringing modern tools to one of the oldest parts of the logistics chain. He's also a guy who loves to cook, play golf, and be near the ocean when he's not disrupting the drayage world. All right, Tyler, welcome to Kev Talks.
Hey, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely.
We got to get the elephant in the room on the table right now. You were in a film with Kevin Costner?
I was, yeah. So the movie's called McFarland, McFarland USA, shot in 2013, came out in 2015. So I had a pretty small role on screen, but it's a track movie. It's based on a true story about this coach who took over the football team at this predominantly Hispanic high school in McFarland, California, and quickly realized, hey, they're not that good at football, but we may have some track stars here, and so started a track team. They went on to win, I think, 12 or 13 state championships in a row. Sports Illustrated did an article on the coach Jim, who's the guy that Kevin Costner played. And my role was I was kind of the captain of the all white bad team, Palo Alto High School, who was the defending state champions. So because of that, I was on set for like 5 weeks, and
Wow.
I think it was week 1 we did a scene, and it was kind of improvised. And basically, they needed somebody from our team to kind of walk across the parking lot as we finished the race, and we won the race, our team, Palo Alto, and kind of mock the McFarland team. And so Kevin was like, "Hey, we need one of the Palo Alto guys. Pick me." And they were like, "All right, well then you have a few lines here. We'll just make them up. Basically, say something like, better luck next time or whatever, right?" And so we probably did like 7 or 8 takes. In between takes, I was talking to Kevin while they were resetting and everything. And it was cool because, he's obviously a mega superstar. It was a Disney movie. The way they had it set up, even though I was an actor, I had a very small role. So, up until that point, I couldn't really go up to Kevin Costner and like say anything. He kind of with his own little team. But after that, and since I shot a scene with them, it was kind of like open. And so for the next 4 weeks on set, I would go up and talk to him all the time. And he was, he was what you expect, right? 6'4", great looking dude, even older, he's probably 65, 70 years old now.
Yeah.
But also just like a genuinely great person. I tell this one story real quick. His last day on set, we were shooting at the Lucas Ranch, the Star Wars guy. He has his own ranch there north of LA. We were shooting at his ranch, and it was Kevin's last day on set. I think it was my second to last day on set. It was sunset, and it was like the big finishing state race where McFarland wins their first state championship. And me and one of the other actors, again, and Connor, even though we had been talking with Kevin this whole time on set, we never were like, hey, can we get a picture with you?
Right.
You want to be cool and like not do that or whatever. And so we were like, we got to get a picture with him, right? And this is, pre Instagram and stuff, right? It's 2013, so you just want a picture, to have for your memories. And so we waited until the end, and then I was like, all right, this is our shot. And so I said, Kevin, would you mind, if we got a picture with you? He was like, oh yeah, no problem at all. Well, the sun was setting, and they needed to get this last shot, and so the director, who it was her first movie at that time, her first big movie, and Kevin directed Dances with Wolves, which won an Oscar. So he was kind of the head honcho on set, behind the camera and in front of the camera. And she kind of yelled across the set, "Hey, Kevin, we gotta go." And he acknowledged her and went back, and we took some photos, and then Connor switched, and then she yelled again, "No, Kevin, we really gotta go." And he kind of turned, said, "Hey, I'm going to take these photos with these two kids. We're going to take as many photos as they want until they like the photos. And when we're done, I'll walk over, we'll shoot the scene, we'll finish the scene. It's going to be a great day." And, it's like when he speaks, it's like all 200 people on set just stop. And for me and Connor, it was a thing where we're these like nobody young actors and this big movie star. And he took, 10 minutes out of his time to not only take a picture with us, but to make sure that, we liked the picture and stop what he did. So, I think that speaks to the type of person he is.
That's awesome. What an experience, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great story. You got to share the picture. We got to put that on the on the promo for this. I don't know if you keep that close to yourself, but yeah, if you're sharing it, man, we'd love to get a copy of it and put that on here.
I'll share it with you. My hair was like down to here.
That's awesome. We got to have it now.
It's set in 1987, so short shorts for the guys, long hair.
We got to have it.
Bring back the jams and the OP t-shirts.
Right? Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
And surely we can pull like a scene or something, right, Higgins? We can pull a scene and throw that up on there as well.
Yeah. I'll have the whole movie before this is over.
So I'm actually in the original trailer. So the first trailer dropped, like I said, we shot it in 2013, but it didn't come out till 2015. And the first trailer dropped, they don't tell me, right? They don't tell my inner manager at that time. And the first trailer dropped, and my scene with me speaking is in the trailer. And I was like, let's go,
awesome.
But yeah, great experience. Really good movie too. It's actually, I think, the only thing that I acted in that I watched and was like, oh, this is really good.
Yeah.
So you did acting after that as well, a little bit, right?
I did. Yeah. I mean, I did a couple commercials for Foot Locker, Champ Sports. I was on a soap opera called Days of Our Lives. I was on a TV show on ABC called Chasing Life. And then I did probably 6 or 7 Lifetime movies.
Wow.
and one or two Hallmark movies. I think the last movie I did was early 2017.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Days of Our Lives, man. That was my mom's show when I was growing up. I can still hear it. Like sands through the hourglass. These are the days of our lives.
Yeah, I mean that show's been going for it's got to be 60 years now.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
well-oiled machine. They're
Yeah.
pumping those episodes out every single day.
It's
All right.
awesome.
So Higgins, here's your next task. You got to pull a montage together of all of that and splice that into the edit of
Heck
this.
yeah, dude.
Our listeners are begging for it. So
Yeah.
you got to do it, Higgins.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Oh, I'll
Yeah.
do it. I don't worry about it.
All right. So Tyler, all right. So how do you get from, from actor to a logistics entrepreneur that you are today?
Yeah, I mean, so in 2017 when I did that last movie, I was kind of already, thinking, hey, I don't know if this is what I want to do, for the rest of my life. I enjoyed acting, but the thing about acting is you don't really do that much acting. Even when you're on set,
Yeah.
you'll be on set for 12 hours and, you shoot maybe an hour, an hour's worth, right? And maybe 5 minutes of that hour actually ends up on screen.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's actually very boring. I think people see it from the outside and think, oh, this is so exciting and glamorous. And it is when they have the movie premieres and things like that. But the actual process of shooting, the movie or the TV show was just not for me.
Yeah.
And so around that same time, I had a really good friend out in LA who had started a couple of companies and then was starting another company. And he reached out and said, hey, I know you're looking to make a transition. We are starting this company in the HR space called Assembly. And, we need a salesperson. I was like, well, I did sales in college a little bit, did it in high school, working for my dad's company. And, but I've been out of the game for a while. And he's like, look, you've dealt with so much rejection and acting, like this will be a whiz for you. And he was right. Like the rejection that you deal with in acting, I think is, at a level most people have never dealt with. It's
Mhm.
very much like you're showing up to auditions and going into a waiting room and there's 40 guys that look just like you, a little, maybe a little different, and you're, getting, turned down. And some of these casting directors will, they'll just straight up tell you like, hey, we're looking for somebody a little taller in this role, or, don't really love the voice for, the person that it's going to be acting against. And, your hair, it's not really what we're looking at. And, so it's like all like very like personal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're selling a product, right, it's like, hey, this product's not the right fit, right? It's
Right.
not as big of a wound on you, right? When you get a no. So, I said, yeah. They said, hey, we don't have any money. We're not going to be able to pay you, for the first, few months. Was fine at the time. And kind of had to learn as I go and build out the entire marketing and sales playbook for Assembly. Um, since then that company has gone on. They do millions in revenue and raised a Series A and are doing really well. And I have, a little bit of equity in that company. So fingers crossed, something happens there with that company. But that's kind of how I transitioned from acting into business. And then how I got into logistics is 2019, Next Trucking. So they had just raised
Mhm.
$1 million from Brookfield and Sequoia. They were kind of the hot, freight tech startup, or one of the hot freight tech startups at that time. They reached out to me on LinkedIn, said, hey, we're looking for someone with a software background that can, do sales and do product demos. I said, okay. And so I didn't really know anything about logistics at that time. If you, would have said, hey, have you ever heard of Maersk? I would say, I don't know who that is. I've never heard of
Yeah.
that. But there was a guy that recruited me who was a CRO at the time, a guy named Bobby Napoltonia, who was like first 20 employees at Salesforce, made a
Wow.
boatload of money there, obviously. was the CRO of Twilio, which is a multi-billion-dollar company out of San Francisco. And his dad was a trucker out of Pennsylvania. And so him and his brother, when Next raised that money, they hired Bobby and Bobby's brother, who was a lawyer, to come on, and they kind of took it on as, a passion thing, right? Because their dad was a trucker, and Bobby is, to this day, the best salesperson that I've ever seen or ever had experience with. And so, of course, he sold me on to, joining Next. And it was one of those things where, like, it's very cliche to say, but like within probably 60 to 90 days, I was like, oh, I really like this industry. Coming from software, especially HR software, everything moves very slow, to going into logistics where there's a fire every single day of every single
Right.
hour. And for me, like, that kept me very engaged and kept me very excited about, the job day in and day out. And so, I fell in love with it, pretty quickly. Um, and, was there for a year, and then moved over to one of their competitors after that. But that's how I got into logistics.
Yeah. That's great. It's an interesting and somewhat of a unique path than from some of our other guests that we've had in the past, Higgins. So let's talk a little bit about Qualle. Tell us where the name come from, and in that, what's the core problem that Qualle is solving?
Yeah, so Qualle, we started that company in 2022, June of 2022. And the name, this was my first company I started. And so I think when people start their first company, it's like anything else, right? The first time you've done it, you just go on Google. How do I start a company? What's the difference between an LLC and an S corp and a C
Is that
corp?
really what you did, Tyler?
Yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
How do you get a domain? How do you do this? How do you do that? Right. And so I was doing all of that in, kind of late 2021, early 2022. And I think I did, an Excel spreadsheet. Here's 100 names that I kind of like, doing some searching, doing some name generators online. And I came across Qualle just, I think just doing an online search. And so Qualle is the German word for jellyfish. And right off the bat, I knew, okay, well, the SEO is going to be very easy, because the only people searching Qualle in the entire world are Germans.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started digging into the word, and, jellyfish are obviously a marine animal, which, coincide with maritime. And then jellyfish are also the most energy efficient animals in the world. And scientists have actually coined the term that a jellyfish moves through the water as the cost of transport, because they move so efficiently. And so I was like, okay, well, that all adds up, right? And it's a unique name that people will, remember. So check, 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 check. Let's go with Qualle, right? So that's kind of how the name, the name came about. In terms of what Qualle is tackling, it's like you said, it's container efficiency. I mean, containers, are not moved efficiently here in the U.S., as well as, most every other country in the world. And what that means for your audience is, here in the US, we're probably 75% import, 25% export, right? But there's not that many matches happening, meaning, in layman's terms, a trucker goes into the port of LA, grabs importer, you know, ABC's container, takes it to the Inland Empire, empties that container. Normally, that trucker has to run that empty container back to the port of LA within, a standard 4 or 5 calendar days for last free day. Otherwise, the ocean carriers start charging them a fee for not getting that container in. The ocean carriers do that because they don't want people just sitting on containers. They need those containers flowing, and those containers going on the boats empty and full, right? What we tackle and what we're trying to encourage is what's called a reuse or a street turn. So instead of running that empty container back, there's a bunch of exporters in that area that need that empty container to put their goods into. And so we do those matches and help facilitate those transactions for those different parties so that those containers are not running back and forth empty as much, right? And there's more full containers coming back. So that's kind of what we're tackling there on the Qualle side.
Yeah, those
And
street turns. I mean, that's really what, in the industry, it's a powerful unlock for the drayage efficiency that is needed. So what kind of adoption, have you seen from, acceptance from BCOs, carriers,
Yeah. So
ocean lines?
our vision has always been, okay, how do we get all four stakeholders involved? And the way that we went about tackling it is, one, we start with the ocean carriers because they own the containers and they own the reuse process. So the main thing that our product does is anytime a trucker, a broker, a freight forwarder wants to reuse an empty container, let's say for Maersk, they come onto our system and they click a button. Our system sends an API call out to Maersk's system and says, hey, update this empty container and put it under this export booking. So what it's saying is, hey, this container is not going to come back to the port empty. It's now going to be moved under this exporter's booking and have that exporter's freight in it, right? And then it gives the trucker the thumbs up or the thumbs down for approval or decline, right? And so we felt like in order to really tackle it, we had to partner with the ocean carriers and we had to be a part of that reuse process. From there, it is, okay, we're helping facilitate this transaction, we're helping automate it, but how do we increase the amount of these transactions that are occurring? So we built a marketplace after that to where these truckers could exchange empty containers. Because one of the things about street turns is the empty container and the booking container have to match up, right? So the exporter has to create a booking with Maersk, and the trucker has to have a Maersk empty. But that doesn't happen every single time, right? So we wanted the truckers to have the ability to say, hey, I have some empties that I don't necessarily need. Does anybody out there need them? And then for truckers that need those empties, instead of having to go into the depots or the ports, they can go quickly grab those empties from other truckers. So that there increases the amount of those street turns that happen. And then the third and fourth phase is, okay, we need to roll the exporters in, right? So these exporters are looking for truckers that are doing street turns. Not only is it an efficiency play for them, but, they can often get reduced rates, right? And then the fourth piece is the importers, right? They're the ones that have these huge yards and DCs with all of these empty containers sitting on. And so how do we then factor them in to where they can work with their trucking companies to increase these street turns, right? So that's kind of the four-phase, system that we brought into the street turn space.
But that is an incredibly complicated process, Tyler,
Correct.
when you get down to it, because it's not just the container anymore. It's the chassis that container is setting on, right? So you have to have coordination around the usage of that chassis, but you have to stop the clock on the loaded container and the empty container and restart the clock with the exporter and the chassis, because now it's a completely different load. And they may want, that stuff at a different terminal, because we've got 12, 13 terminals out there in the LA Long Beach complex, and you may pick it up at Tray Pack, but you need to take it back somewhere else, or you need, something like that. So that's it. Kudos to you. I mean, it's an incredibly complicated process when you start putting all the pieces together.
Very, very complicated. And the chassis piece is one of the biggest pieces. So the clock does stop when you get that street turn approval. So that clock then starts over to the exporter side.
Yep.
So then now that exporter is on the clock to get that full container into the port. In terms of the chassis, one thing that we identified pretty early on when it came to the marketplace side was top loaders. right? Which are these, these heavy equipment that's sitting on these truckers' yard where
Yep.
they can lift a container off of a chassis and ground it or put it on a different chassis. And that was a huge unlocking piece and something we've spoken to with a lot of the port authorities about. Because then you can have a trucker that says, hey, I have all these empties, but they're on my chassis, but I also have a top loader. So if you come in and bring your chassis, we can flip it over, to you, right? And they can keep their chassis.
Yep.
So yeah, very, 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 very complicated um, problem though. That's for sure.
And then you've got appointments. I mean, so
and then in LA you have the empty appointments. It gets very, very complicated.
yeah,
Not a
I
lot of
don't
states
envy.
and across the country to make that process a little easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Tyler, the way you laid it out, for our audience, who's your primary? Are you talking primary customer? Are you talking to BCOs? I mean, you're obviously talking to all of them, and it's needed. But in regards to the value that Qualle provides, are you selling directly to a trucker because they have access to this, or is it to BCOs, or is it everybody?
We are selling directly into the ocean carriers and the truckers. We also have export customers who they're posting their bookings right into the system so that truckers can see, right? So you have exporter, XYZ who says, hey, I have a booking of 20 MSC containers, and then that goes out to all the truckers in network. And those truckers can say, hey, actually, I have 10 empty MSCs a couple miles away. I was going to run those back empty to the port, right? I've already gotten paid my round trip rate from my import customer. Let me reuse those and get paid to run those fulls back to the port, right? So, but the primary customer is the trucker and the ocean carrier.
Got it. Yep. Makes sense. All right. So you told us a great story at Qualle. Do you have a great story of how you came up with the name of DrayRates?
I think that one was a little more, nail in the head.
Yeah.
It was, what are we doing? We're doing drayage rates. Let's call it DrayRates. And it was the perfect name too, because a lot of, customers and companies we talk to, their group email for drayage is DrayRates, right? So yeah, perfect name. So I don't have a cool story like Qualle, but
You didn't have to Google it. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, then tell us the genesis behind the story of launching DrayRates.
Yeah.
yeah. So probably about a year ago, I just saw a lot of activity on the over the road side in terms of pricing. You have DAT, Freight Wave Sonar, Truck Stop, Green Screens AI, right? And I was just like, why is there no pricing at all on the drayage side? And is there a way to do it? So we had some data just from the Qualle side. I took that, threw it into an LLM, said, hey, can you give me a line chart of these lanes year over year, and then put that on LinkedIn and said, hey, here's these lanes in LA year over year. Is anybody interested in this data? And that post got, a decent amount of likes and comments, but I got a lot of DMs from it. And there was a lot of people very, very interested in it. And so I took that to my two co-founders, Sean and Jeff, and I said, this isn't, market validation, 100%, but there's definitely something here. We should look into this. And so, over probably the next 2 or 3 months, I started reaching out to all of the truckers on the Qualle side that we, had a good relationships with. And to give your audience some context on that side of the business, we have over 2,000 trucking companies signed up from, all parts of the U.S. And so we were in a pretty unique advantage to launch something like DrayRates. And so I took it to these truckers and I just said, hey, this is what we're thinking about building. Here's a very raw mock-up. Is this something that you would find useful? Is this something that you would pay for? And surprisingly, or I guess not surprisingly, most of them said, yeah, we would love to know, what the market is and where we compare, right? Benchmark ourselves against the market. A lot of them do it, but they do it with 2 or 3 buddies, right? But they don't do it with the entire market. Um, and so we said, okay. And so we started building out the MVP. And then we went back to a lot of those truckers and said, hey, we need rate data if we're going to build this thing. Would you share your rate data with us? And surprisingly, a lot of them said, yeah, we'll share our rate data with you. And so that's how we started building out, DrayRates. And it was early this year, maybe mid-January, when we got done with the MVP. Gave it to all those truckers that shared rate data with us, and then reached out to like 30 brokerages and freight forwarders and said, hey, we built this new product. We love you to test it out for 14 days and just tell us everything you like and everything you don't like. And so they did that from, mid-January to mid-February. We took all the feedback from all of those early testing companies, inputted that into the system, and then launched the product March 10th.
Wow. So fresh launch.
Yeah, it's definitely, brand new at this point. And just to be completely transparent, I reached out to Tyler earlier this year and said, hey, I want you on the podcast. And he said, hey, I got something brewing. I want to give it some time to marinate and then come and talk about it. And poof, here we are, now in June. And so it's really, really fresh. So talk a little bit about how you're using AI. We mentioned earlier an AI powered assistant. Talk about that and kind of RFP scenarios, how that's being used.
Yeah, I mean, we're using AI in every facet of DrayRates. I don't think that we would have been able to build DrayRates, as it is right now, pre-AI. Definitely wouldn't have been able to build it as quickly as we built it without AI.
Yeah.
But internally, it's in every facet of what we do. It's powering, our rate engine and the model and all of the intake for the data that we pull in on a daily basis from customers and partner systems. And then, on a UI perspective, it's sitting there within the platform as an assistant for our customers, right? To show them like, hey, here's the market rate. And based on your historical rate, here's your suggested rate. Here's, if you're a broker, your suggested buy, your suggested sell. Here's why I think you have wiggle room here and wiggle room there. So it's really sitting there and kind of guiding, that salesperson or that rep or that operational person with not only our data, but their data as well. So, we were on a call a couple of weeks ago with like a top 10 broker in the US. And it was one of their like VPs of technology. And it was his first time seeing the product. We had already shown it to some other people within the company. And, he straight up, he was just like, you guys built this at the exact right time. He, and we were like, yeah, we did, and he was like, I'm kind of jealous, because a lot of these, older companies, they're having to now rip out a lot of their, technology and replace it with a lot of AI. Whereas we just built it straight from the ground up, which is what you're going to see every single software company, from now going forward. Everything's going to be built with AI. It's going to be built, in a quicker manner than you've ever seen before.
I love that. Kudos to you. That's exciting. It is perfect timing. So how do you see Qualle and DrayRates complement each other?
Yeah, I mean, so they're obviously in the same space, Drayage, right? In terms of, complementing each other, they're both very separate entities, right? They both have their own website, their own platform. We have customers that use both systems, but they're not really speaking with each other or interacting with each other. They are very, very separate systems. We have in Qualle the ability for our trucker customers to then click in and then off over to DrayRates. But we're keeping them separate. They'll be separate going forward.
That's great. Good.
I'm thinking, KP, you go ahead.
Well, yeah, I think we could talk a lot about, again, I think the Dray rate component is so exciting. And primarily because, it's relatively new, but the AI integration into it, and because it's something that's been needed, I think we could talk quite a bit on that. But I think you come from, Tyler, I think you come from a very unique perspective, relatively new in the industry, but, your entrepreneurial spirit. I'd love to kind of get your take on, some of the biggest inefficiencies that you're seeing in the drayage market today, outside of, obviously the street turns, and you've been able, Qualle, can capitalize upon that. But what are some of the other biggest inefficiencies you see in the drayage market?
Man, I think, honestly,
is that a separate episode? Right?
Yeah. Honestly, going in line with DrayRates, one of the big inefficiencies that I don't think we necessarily thought of when we started DrayRates, but we hear it from all of our customers now, is on the broker side and freight forwarder side, and this affects the truckers. These brokers are constantly quoting on business, but not necessarily winning the business. And pre-DrayRates, their process is, okay, I'll call my 5, 10, 15 truckers in that market and say, what's your rate? What's your rate? What's your rate? What's your rate? And then do a little calculation, come up with a number, and then go back to the customer. And then the customer, gets back to them or doesn't get back to them, and they don't win the business. And the truckers, so then they feel like they're getting rate farmed, right? And they're constantly responding to these emails and picking up these phone calls and giving out their rates to these brokers and forwarders without, winning any business, right? And so the brokers really, they don't like that process, because every time they do that and they don't give that trucker business, that trucker's, more inclined to not answer their phone call or not respond to their email, right? And then obviously the truckers don't like that, because they're just fielding all of these, rate farming requests. And so that's a huge inefficiency, right? There's just this constant communication back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, when nobody actually has the freight in hand. And so DrayRate steps in there for the brokers and forwarders, and they can get a market rate in a few seconds, add their margin to it, know that they're going to be covered, get that back to the customer. And when the customer says, yeah, we can work with that, then can they call their truckers and say, hey, what can you do on this lane? This isn't something that I'm bidding on. I have this business in hand. I can get you the work order, in 10 minutes, right? That's a really big inefficiency.
Yeah.
That we're solving. But I mean, in terms of, macro, it's like what Kevin Higgins said. I mean, the chassis piece is obviously a huge inefficiency, and there's pools all over the country. And, if they were all just one standardized chassis, it would be a lot easier. We always joke on the street turn side, if you really want street turns to take off, just paint all the boxes black, right? And then there's no matching of, well, this CMA container has to be with this CMA booking. It's just, it's a black box. It works for any booking, right? But yeah, it's like you said, I think
Never know. Yep.
We could have a whole another episode on the inefficiencies within drayage, but that's what makes drayage so exciting for me. Like I never really delved into truckload. I did a little bit for some customers where they just needed help. But I look at truckload and I think like, okay, point A to point B, seems kind of boring. Sorry if I'm offending any of the audience that's heavy in truckload. But drayage is, and there's so many variables in play at any given time, right? And you have the port authorities, and you have the depots, and you have the chassis, and the ships coming in and being delayed, and the terminals and the times there for trucks to get in and out, and it's all over the place. And one of the things that we, kind of my vision with DrayRates is I feel like most people think that drayage rates aren't volatile like they are in truckload, because truckload, you have a lot of owner operators and that capacity is moving all over the country, right? And whereas drayage is very localized and those trucks are staying in that market. But, what we found with truckers is, I think a lot of the reason that there's not a lot of volatility is these truckers will say, well, here's my rates, to these 50 cities, and then they won't update them for a year. And it's like, okay, well then, yeah, there's not going to be a lot of volatility in that rate because it's the same rate from January to December. And they shouldn't be doing that because they're leaving money on the table, because the rates are going like this in reality. And that's because of port congestion, terminal times, vessel berths,
exactly.
all these different factors that come into play. And so something that we're doing, kind of mid to longer term is we are in conversations with a ton of different data providers right now who hold that ocean data, booking data, terminal data, port data, so that we can stitch all of that together and then show you not only the rate trend for lanes or markets week over week, but give you context as to why these things are happening, right? And then my hope is that truckers, when it comes to the spot market, will say things like, whatever Dray rate says, that's where we're going to be around about for, any spot one-off live unload, right? Because they may, like I said earlier, have that rate that's just stable, but the market's demanding, $50 or $100 more for that container, and they're leaving money on the table there.
Yeah. I love that, because you start to use your term, you start to stitch together all the non-real dollar cost factors, I guess, if you will. Like, if I look at rates 30 years ago from Long Beach to Southgate, California, it's not that much difference today.
I knew that's where you were going. I was
and what the rates are, right?
Higgins. Yes.
But, in 1994, 1990s, these drivers could make 3+ turns a day in and out of these terminals, right? So they were making $450, $600 a day. And now the rate may be a little bit higher, but they're making 2 turns a day. So they're actually making less money. So when you start factoring in all those things, Tyler, which I'm imagining is like, terminal turn times, things of that nature, congestion on the 710 or whatever it may be. And look, your cost is here, but the components that make up your productivity are up here. So you should be looking at this, more dynamic pricing model and just giving them that information, because even BCOs, as a drayage provider, you can go to a BCO and say, hey, my cost is going up. And they're like, well, show me the data.
Right.
And like, you prove to me your cost is going up. Well, I'm paying, $8 a gallon for diesel, and I'm 1 turn down a day and this and that. So I love that idea of using all of that data to actually make the drayage providers that much more, that much smarter about what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, further out, it's, very simply, hey, bookings are up, across the Trans-Pacific, and therefore there's going to be, higher demand in the West Coast markets, and therefore the rates are going to go up, right? It's what we're seeing right now with the tariff reduction containers that are now on the water coming into the West Coast ports. The rates on the West Coast are trending up, right?
Yeah.
We can get ahead of that and show the predictability trends, and then, give that context to our customers to say, like, hey, this is where we see this going. If you're a trucker, obviously hold off as long as you can, because you're going to get better rates. If you're a broker or forwarder, maybe try and secure capacity now. On the shorter side, it is, hey, the GPA's terminal turn times went from 41 minutes to 62 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that, you should be charging more if you have a customer that needs a container moved today or tomorrow, right? To really kind of like I said, stitching that data together and factoring that into a true spot market for the drayage space, which we've never had.
Yep. Love it.
Yeah, such a good conversation. You've got me thinking about so many different ideas for some future episodes that I think we can drill down even further. But as we're starting to wrap up, because you've built 2 startups, what's something you've learned the hard way?
I mean, how much time do you have?
Right? Give me the biggest one. Give me one.
So, I think for me, I'm not a very patient person, and that works in my favor in the sense that I can get things done a lot quicker than a lot of people. But, it doesn't work for me in the sense that, things just take time, especially in logistics. Before starting Qualle, I had experience in startups, but I was never, kind of leading on the product side and dealing with the developers on a daily basis. And just, it takes time to build. It's quicker now with AI. But at the time we were building Qualle, everything takes a lot longer. Right. And then, with customers, it often takes a lot longer, especially as you guys know, working for enterprise companies on the enterprise side, it takes a lot longer. I think, I don't know if this is necessarily what you asked, but like in terms of if there's any like founders listening to this, like for me, it's, you really have to like figure out how to ride the roller coaster and not let the lows and highs, affect you too much. Because, we've had a lot of lows in 3 years. And I know almost every founder's experienced those lows. And we've had a lot of highs, and, as soon as you're high, you got to be looking on the horizon because there's a low, right? You climb a hill, guess what? There's a valley coming. You're down in a valley, guess what? There's, a hill, on the horizon. And really just kind of, being able to steady course that and just have like a true North Star that you're heading towards and not let things like really like sway you has helped. And I think it's like anything else, like what I've learned is like in anything in life, right? Whether it's hitting a baseball, hitting a golf ball, public speaking, doing podcasts like you guys do it, it's not going to be easy the first time you do it, but it's going to be easier the next time, and then the next time, and then the next time, and then the next time, right? It's really that practice. And so I look out, in the world and I see these entrepreneurs that have started business 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you realize that it's easier to start number 2, and it's easier to start number 3, and it's way easier to start number 6. I mean, we stood DrayRates up so quickly because I learned so much and we learned so much through Qualle that it was like, yeah, this is what we need to do. This is what we need to do. We need to get this lawyer to do this. Boom, 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 done, boom. And we're like set,
Yeah.
And so, I would tell, like I said, any founders, like stay the course, there's going to be ups and downs, and the biggest thing I think anybody can do is you just have to do it. You just have to like literally just do it. Like everybody gets caught up in, oh, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if that happens? And it's like, I saw a video a few weeks ago where this billionaire was talking about Elon Musk. And he was like, the thing about Elon Musk is he's like, this guy fired 300 rockets off while Boeing was still, working on their designs. And guess who? He's winning because he learned something every single time, one of those rockets failed. And it's the same thing, in business and starting a company. It's like, it's never going to be perfect. Just send it, figure it out, pivot, make a move, and then keep going. And I promise you will get from point A to point B a lot quicker than if you just try and master plan some genius architecture, and then roll that out and go. So,
Wow.
like
That's
show,
great.
just do it.
Yeah, great advice.
Yeah.
Wonderful advice. I love every word that you said, and it definitely resonates. And I know Higgins is thinking the same thing as Mr. Entrepreneur himself. And myself as well. In the last couple of years, what you just said is the truth. So thank you for that. All right. So what's next for Qualle and DrayRates?
Yeah, I mean, Qualle, we're year 3 in. We have 10 ocean carriers. Like I said, over 2,000 trucking companies. We're adding the 11th ocean carrier right now. So that business is continually growing. And then DrayRates, a lot of my focus right now is on DrayRates. That business is going very well, very quickly.
Awesome.
We'll just continue. We have a lot on the roadmap, product wise, that we're implementing that our customers asked of us. Some that we already had on the roadmap before even launching the company. So we'll be focusing on that. And my goal is to get DrayRates in the hands of as much of the market as I can. Over the next few years, I feel like we have a real opportunity where we don't really have any competitors on the market average side right now in the drayage space. We have a real opportunity to, get this in as many hands of truckers, brokers, and forwarders as we can, as well as establish partnerships. One thing I want to say is that now dealing with these over-the-road software companies and customers, there is a ton of collaboration and partnership and integrations on the over-the-road side, and there's almost zero on the drayage side. And there's really big companies on the drayage side that should be spearheading that and, opening themselves up to integrating and partnering with, other drayage technology providers. But for some reason, the drayage space is, I got my thing and I'm going to do it. And, I'm not going to like open myself up. Whereas over the road, you just see all of this collaboration. And so something that, we want to do and we want to spearhead is we want to partner with everybody. If you want DrayRates in your TMS, let's go. You want it in your CRM? Let's go. You want it on your website? Let's go. If you use some other truckload pricing platform and you want DrayRates in that, we'll set it up. We want to have it wherever it needs to be to make it as easy as possible for our customers.
I love that. Yeah, we should connect sometime, probably 1st of July, somewhere around that time. I'm going on vacation next week, so we can't connect next week. But love to chat. Are you guys going to be at Intermodal Expo in September? You know if you guys are going to be down there?
Is that up in Chicago?
That's in Long Beach.
I don't know. Yeah, I was at it last year. I don't have any plans, but somebody from our team will be. So we have team members that live in LA. So somebody from our team will be there. I'm not sure if I'll be there. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, Tyler, this has been really, really good. But how can people connect with you or learn more about both platforms?
Yeah. So if you're in need of a street turn or just want to talk, Qualle.co. For drayage pricing, DrayRates.ai. The easiest way to get a hold of me is just LinkedIn. I'm one of those people. I'm on LinkedIn probably 30 hours a day. So if you connect with me and DM me, I promise you I'll see it and I'll respond. And would love to talk street turns, drayage pricing, drayage in general, or how I can do podcast interviews a little better.
No, you did great, man.
Well, listen, Tyler, this has been great. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing your journey. I love your entrepreneurial spirit, your drive, the vibe that you have, and just the energy that you bring to solving problems, in the industry. So kudos to you. Again, thanks for joining Kev Talks, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me on.
Appreciate you, Tyler. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Kev Talks, Real World Global Logistics. If today's discussion inspired you, don't forget to follow, subscribe, rate, and share our podcast.
Remember, every great journey in logistics starts with a single step forward. Let's continue working together to transform the industry.